Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, thank you for joining us on ITV Gold yet again. How are you doing today?
Quite well. Thank you for having me. Always look forward to your interviews.
Of course, it's so important to bring you on, especially right now. There's so much that's happening in the nation. But let's start with COVID-19, Borough President here. You are in Brooklyn. It is one of the hardest hit, areas right now with clusters of COVID-19 being seen across the borough. So just starting off this interview, I'd like to know more information about what's going on and also what kind of changes have you had to make since these clusters came around?
It's so important to really engage everyday New Yorkers to know that we play a role to prevent the reemergence of COVID-19. We've done a successful job of bringing down our numbers. We were the epicenter of COVID-19 in America several months ago, and we don't want to go backwards. And so it was identified as several locations and neighborhoods in the borough and throughout the city were considered red spots. Those are spots where there were increases. And we want to get on the ground in those areas and empower government, community residents with personal responsibilities, and making sure we get PPEs, personal protective equipment, and information on the ground to prevent the reemergence.
Yes, definitely. What is the reason of this spike, according to you? And would you say the situation right now in Brooklyn is somewhat under control with the measures you have had to take?
There are many reasons. When you look at some of the communities, many of those communities are non-English speaking communities where you see the spikes. And we have made, I believe, a calculative error by not ensuring we had credible messengers on the ground in these communities to constant remind people about COVID-19. Human behavior is not easy to change just on one notification, or if you're not notifying people in the methods in which they receive information. And some people may say, well, it's been 7 months, everyone knows about COVID-19. That is just not true. Many people know about it, but not at the same level with the constant reminders that others are receiving if you are a primarily English-speaking city. We, in the borough of Brooklyn, 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English at home. And so if we don't continuously communicate in many of those different languages, Urdu, Chinese, French, Creole speaking, if we don't continue to speak in those languages in the reminder phase, we could lose a potential number of people. And that is what you're seeing. There's a correlation between cultural norms and increases in COVID-19 in areas. That is not by accident.
Yes, for sure. When we are talking about this, I have to ask you, the entire nation right now is discussing the second surge of COVID-19. And now because of these clusters, some even are calling this a second surge, which is starting in New York City. Are you right now prepared for a second surge in terms of PPE, beds and ventilators? And, also, what are your biggest concerns right now with this?
Yes, here in Brooklyn, many of the hospitals and even my office, we have held a stockpile of PPE so we could immediately mobilize on the ground in those infected areas. We have spent time in some of those areas already. This morning, I was at a few train stations reminding passengers on the importance of wearing PPEs and face coverings, handing them out to passengers. And so access to personal protection equipment is so important. And we must ensure that the city has an emergency rapid response team that should be in conjunction with the police department to identify areas that you have a high level of non-compliance. Those are the types of partnerships we need to immediately identify where the problems are and get the resources on the ground in those locations.
While we are discussing that, I have to ask you, and I asked you that in our previous interview as well, what is the situation with food insecurity in your borough right now? Has it improved, or because of these clusters forming again, you're seeing that need again?
It's a real problem. Many people who are not in senior centers, adult daycare centers, or not in school, where these were places where individuals were receiving a normal distribution of food, cooked food, and by seeing the change in how we are delivering these food services, it is impacting people in a real way. Even our food pantries. Many of our food pantries are struggling now to keep their doors open. The lack of access of not only food, but healthy food is something that we are really struggling with. We need help from the federal government. We have not been receiving a lot of support from the federal government around this issue, and it has become a real problem that has reached a crisis level.
Let me ask you this, since you mentioned the federal government already, what is exactly needed from the state government and the federal government for this borough right now, especially when you're looking at the food insecurity issue, as well as the economic crisis for the small businesses?
And you said it clearly this morning. I talked about, how do we get our city up and running so that we could address the economic crisis we're facing, and you do it in several ways. Number one, we have to build back trust in our transportation system. We have a multi-billion-dollar deficit, and many people are not using the transportation system because they don't feel comfortable enough to take the transportation system. If we don't have the comfortability of our transportation system, then people are not going to go to the central business district, which is in Manhattan. We're not going to see our retail shops open. We're not going to increase our employment. And that is why it's crucial that the federal government now ensures that we reinvest money into our cities, particularly a city like New York, which is an economic driver for the entire country. So we need funding. We need a stimulus from the federal government. I'm disappointed that the president and Congress have basically not moved at the pace that we should be moving to see the urgency on the ground. We need financial help from the federal government.
While we are talking about these levels of government, I have to ask you, what do you have to say about Mayor Bill de Blasio and his handling of the situation right now? I know you were a little critical about his handling of the education system as well. I would love to get some insight into that.
Well, this was an extremely difficult situation. And if I have to say that any mayor who would have basically absorbed the thrust of a formidable opponent, COVID-19, that changes on many different levels, a lot of uncertainties, and you have to be able to respond as rapidly as we were learning about this new pandemic. And so we have to really understand the complexities of it. I think that my basic critique of what has happened is the lack of communication, consistency, and coordination between the state and city government. It's unfortunate, as I stated, we did not receive the financial support, even in the area of the PPPs, the money that came from the federal level. But at the same time, I believe we need to shift our cities into a real-time mechanism that we could better handle crises. We have to, as a city and cities across America, we must manage our assets, have an equitable distribution of resources, and the key is in real time. We didn't do that. Far too many communities did not receive resources in an equitable fashion. Many of our safety net hospitals, which are the hospitals that you treat the poorer communities, were not receiving the same level of resources. And so we did not have a fair distribution of resources in real time, and we failed to manage our assets in an appropriate fashion.
Let me ask you something real quick in following up to that. How long do you think it'll take you to get those needed resources? How many months are we looking at?
Well, we need to put it on fast track. I know that here in the city, we started having small manufacturers open businesses where we're making personal protection equipment, hospital gowns. There's a great initiative of a small company and the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and there are other companies that are opening. We should incentivize the repurposing of everything from tailor shop to seamstress shops. I think there's a great opportunity to really play a dual role, infusing real resources in the economy by small businesses, and at the same time, creating these supplies we need to help us weather if there's a second surge of coronavirus.
That's such an important perspective. I'm sure the audience learned a lot from this. Let's now talk about the elections. Since I have you here, I have to ask you a couple of questions on that. My first question to you has to be about the borough of Brooklyn. Do you think they're voting right now? And if so, what issues, according to you, matter the most to the borough currently?
Yeah, I think the entire country is looking forward to the election, no matter who one is deciding to vote for, the exercising the right to vote, having a board of election system that is fair, that is competent to count every vote is crucial. But when you look at the issues that are important, people are really concerned with public safety. We have an overproliferation of handguns in our city that's leading to a real crime problem, and people are concerned about that. They're also concerned about the safety of our city. How healthy is our city to ensure not to be infected or spread coronavirus, and to make sure we have the hospital care for anyone who's actually infected by COVID-19. And lastly, employment. They're concerned about the economic status and the economic strength of our city. We have to get our small businesses up and operating again. Over 50% of the employment in our city comes from small businesses. They're the lifeblood of our city, and even the micro businesses that we're seeing going through a very difficult time. You know, it's predicted we may lose anywhere from 30 to 40% of small businesses. That is something that would really devastate our economy, and we must infuse resources and support in our small businesses.
Definitely. Small businesses are surely the building block of this economy, and we're just hoping for the best. What are some of the issues you're personally concerned about in this election?
Just receiving real support from the federal government. It's crucial that the federal government understands that if New York City goes under, so too does a major part of the financial stability of this country. And I'm concerned that that is not clearly understood. And we need to refocus our intentions on the business centers to make sure that we can use these centers to re-emerge as a city. The entire country is hurting. Big cities have taken the brunt of a lot of the fallout from COVID-19, and we need to refocus our attention to get a city like New York up and running again. And I'm not quite sure that the president really understands that.
What have you felt about, both these campaigns that have ran? It's been somewhat of a contentious fight, for sure, in these elections. President Donald Trump has been going around the nation holding rallies even after he was, diagnosed with COVID-19, which he recovered from. Former Vice President Joe Biden has been hosting his own campaigns in a more secured, socially distant manner. Yesterday, we saw former President Barack Obama address the nation as well in a very safe manner through a drive-in crowd. How have you sort of analyzed these two campaigns, and do you believe they're reaching out to their supporters, right?
I believe that one thing that I think the president has fallen short on is he has sent the wrong message out to the American people that COVID is not a serious virus. Removing his mask, refusing to wear a mask, feeling as though that there's a level of invincibility to the attack on one's body with COVID-19. I think that message has really hurt many people from understanding the seriousness of the moment. And so I take my hat off to Biden and Harris camp for making sure that everything that they're doing, they are continually amplifying how important it is that we take COVID-19 in a serious fashion. And I think that's how they have been campaigning. I'm hoping that the current president also do the same to let the American people know that thousands of Americans have died from COVID-19. Many more have been impacted and inflicted with the virus. This is a serious moment for our country, and we need to focus on ensuring that we minimize the number of people who are impacted or infected so that we could really get this virus behind us so our country can reopen, rebuild, and renew our spirit as Americans.
Yes, definitely. More than 222,000 lives already lost in this nation to this virus. It is so serious. You know, while we are discussing these elections, I have to ask you about none other than Senator Kamala Harris. She is half African American and half South Asian American. Such a huge moment for both the communities in terms of getting such a big party ticket. What kind of message do you think, you know, somebody like Senator Harris sends across the nation while we're still in this racial strife, while there's still racial unrest in the nation as we speak?
Well, clearly, messages are not only verbalized, they are actualized. And her presence, South Asian origin, African American, her presence sends a signal. There's more than one way to say you are welcome. It can't be just in letters. It must be in actions of a country. And I think that not only should the African American and South Asian community be proud of this moment that our country is acknowledging to have a vice president of diversity, a woman, and of two important groups in this country. But we should also be proud because even if you're not South Asian or African American, you should see in her nomination the potentiality that all groups have a right to be part of the American dream. And for far too long, the prosperity of this country has not been shared across every community, every neighborhood, and every ethnicity. Her presence is stating we're on the pathway to change that. America is representative of diversity. That's our secret weapon. It is that which makes us great in the first place. And I think her presence there at the highest office of our country is sending a signal to every child, every woman, every individual, no matter if you're English speaker, no matter if you were born here or if you came here and adopted America as your home, you see the possibilities that are on the horizon.
You know, while we are discussing Senator Harris, she's a huge proponent of women's rights and making sure that they get their basic rights and needs that we've been always talking about. You know, while I have you here still, I would love to know your personal opinion on the Supreme Court hearings and the nomination that we are seeing. Do you think this should be happening, you know, so soon, right before the elections?
No, I don't. And I think it's a level of hypocrisy that the Republican Senate majority once pushed back and denied the appointment from President Barack Obama, which was far greater in distance from the actual election. Yet they are attempting to fast track this appointee. And I say no nomination until after the inauguration. The next president of the United States should make the determination of who should sit on the Supreme Court. You know, I understand in sports, we had a modified, shortened baseball season, the American pastime, but choosing who's going to sit on the highest court in our land should not be a fast track. We should have very slow deliberation. We should have an opportunity to look over the opinions and question the nominee, because this will have a major impact on what our country is going to look like. And I think it is extremely unfortunate that the Senate majority, Republican-controlled Senate, has made the determination of ignoring what they warned the country about under the Obama administration. They are totally ignoring that now, and that's really troubling.
What would you do if Roe v. Wade was questioned again?
I believe that we should always allow women to have the right to choose. And it's a battle that is not only something that we're facing as individuals, but families. And I think that those are just one of the issues that we are facing. We're facing healthcare. We're facing marriage. We're facing so many important issues that are going to come in front of the Supreme Court, Obamacare. All of these issues are so important. And so we need to fight to make sure that America does not go backwards, but we continue to move forward in the fair system.
I just have a few questions left here for you. And one of the most important questions we have been getting here, and something that's concerning actually people nationwide, is the security of this election this year. We just heard about the Russia-Iran probe in interference of these elections. There's a lot of questions about mail-in ballots and its authenticity. There's questions about what to do in terms of sending your ballots in early. Could you explain to us how Brooklyn is making sure that this election safety is maintained and every voice is counted that votes this year?
Well, you have to have trust in the process, and it's crucial that every state has its own board of election mechanism. In New York State, we continue to monitor the system, ensure that every voter has an opportunity to vote if it's early voting, or if they go to the poll site, or if it's mail-in ballots. The goal is to dismantle any obstacle that would prevent an American from voting. And we are calling on all of our Board of Elections throughout the entire country to play the same role to ensure that every ballot is counted and it is done in a fairer way. And then we need to really evolve to a point where we could use technology in an effective way to ensure an active participation of voters across America. And I'm hoping that's something we will look at in the future. But right now, it's important that all of our Board of Elections ensure that every vote is cast and every vote is counted.
Definitely. You know, while we are discussing these elections, what would you say to the South Asian community members that may still be deciding if they want to vote or not? You know, that has also come up in the last couple of days. Some people are so upset, and they are saying, a lot of them are young voters as well, that are so upset that they do not want to vote. What do you say to those people?
Well, I believe that particularly our young, your vote is going to determine the future of this country. And they have to make a decision based on their conscience. If the country is moving in a direction that they believe it should, then they're going to vote one way. If they believe that this is a moment of change and a moment of reflection as a country, they're going to vote another. I think it's important that they participate and vote. That is probably one of the most important exercises you could do in your civic duties and responsibilities. And then you will make a determination on, based on the vote you cast, will determine which direction our country will move towards.
Definitely. It is so important to vote in this election. So crucial. How do you think the Democratic Party is doing right now?
I believe that these are troubling times for our entire country. And as a Democrat, I think it's important that we stay true to our values and understand that during these difficult times, this is a moment of unification and a moment of healing, a moment of coming together as a country. We're going to need every aspect of our country, our business community, our governmental agencies, and everyday citizens to unite. We have one formidable opponent right now, and that's COVID-19. And we're not going to defeat COVID-19 and all of the negative byproducts that come from it if we're not united as a country with one mission: to save as many lives, to prevent as many infections as possible, and to get our economy and country back operating so that we can continue to be the greatest country on the globe.
Just to follow up on that, personally, what are the states that you are following currently that you think would determine a great outcome of the election?
I'm sorry, you said what are the...
What are the states that you're looking at that you think could determine the outcome of this election? Besides New York, of course.
Well, clearly in America, many people who don't live in America don't quite understand. We have the Electoral College votes. It's not just a popular vote. As you know, Hillary Clinton had more votes, a couple of million more votes than the current president, but it's having the votes in the right states. And so Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, those are very important states. And so it's crucial that those states are the states we're looking at. Florida is extremely important for the outcome of the election. And so there's a lot of attention that's being focused there.
Yes, for sure. And finally, my last question to you has to be: what are you focused on for the next 2 months as we go into winter, and as more outdoor gatherings stop and more indoor stuff begins to happen? What are you focused on personally?
Focusing on our transportation system. Our transportation system is the lifeblood of our city. Our trains and buses are the arteries and veins that allow people to move throughout the city. We must ensure that it continues to pump in a very healthy way so that people can move about. Once we get our system up and operating and it's believed to be safe and people have the confidence in the system, I think we can get our city back to work and we will see the prosperity that New York is expecting. And I am going to focus on that prosperity is not only localized to one part of the city, but we will have shared prosperity and function in the correct manner in our city.
Definitely. I would love for you to give one last message to the first responders and the healthcare workers and the essential workers that continue to work tirelessly every day.
Well, it's one thing to say thank you, but it's another thing to show how thankful we are for what they did. They put themselves in harm's way. When the city shut down, they stood up. And we need to ensure that we have combat pay for them. We need to ensure that we give them the necessary supplies and equipment that they need so they can do their jobs in a very safe way. And their actions are not foreign to me because, as you know, I moved into Borough Hall when COVID-19 came to the city, and I joined them on the ground. I went into public housing to give out personal protection equipment. I delivered food to the hospitals, and we had a team of volunteers that were able to get everything from ventilators to hospital gowns and other supplies. And so I know what they did during the time of need because we were side by side in doing so. And so my thank you to them is because of not what I read or what I heard, but what I saw firsthand. And I'm proud of the men and women of this city who are considered to be first responders, not only in our hospitals, but our first responders and essential employees are also the individuals who stocked our grocery store shelves, who drove our trains and buses, who did everything that was needed to ensure that the city can continue to give the vital services to function as a city.
Yes, that was so beautifully said. I really, truly appreciate you for your time here.
Thank
Thank you
you
so much for joining us.
Thank you. Take care.